Hello programmers! Today we're going to work on a SpriteKit game, and you can collect enough coins to win the game, or if you get hit by one of the anvils, then it's game over. So we'll learn how it's not too hard to create a little game like this in SpriteKit in just one video. Alright, step one, create a new Xcode project and leave a game selected when you hit next. You're going to see that it's going to choose Swift as the default language and SpriteKit. So just give this whatever name you'd like. So I'm going to call mine Coin Catcher 2 because I had another video where there was a coin catcher one, but it was just tapping on the coins. This time it'll be a character catching the coins. Then you'll hit next and decide where you want to store this. And I already practiced this, so I already have a folder with the same name. Next, let's talk about the assets that I want to download for this project. If I go to opengameart.org, there's some free assets that you can download, sound files, image files. I'm going to download this, I'll put the link in the description, this red horn land monster. So I'm going to download that, and it ends up having a couple different images to allow for animation. I'm going to next download, I searched for just ground. This is just a segment I'm going to have as the ground in my game. I also picked an anvil image. I'll put the link in the description. And I just needed one coin image, although if you want it to look like it's spinning, you can look at my previous video. So put all these, download all these, and then you're going to add these to your assets folder. And adding is as simple as just dragging these in. And if you want to rename them, you can. I'm going to probably rename from frame 1 and frame 2 to something different. We've got our ground image, and now I just need the coin and the anvil. All right, I've got all the images in there, and if I just click and hit enter, I could rename some of those images. So instead of frame _1, I don't mind having it be frame 1, but that like the hyphen's a little confusing there. And then one of the frames is when the monster gets hit, its eyes turn into an X. Gold coin, we don't need the number 6 there. All right, so I'm going to use all these images in my game scene. And the default game scene right now is just a hello world. We can get rid of that label right now if we want to, or we can change that into a label that says like number of coins collected, but I'm just going to delete it for now. If you don't want a black background, you can choose from the color chooser a different background, like maybe a green background. It's a little bit of an obnoxious green, but good enough for now. And then let me start adding in some of those sprites. So I'm going to go over and look at the different assets. I have the ground asset, and I can resize that and put that toward the bottom. Perfect. And then I also want the character. So I'll just start with frame 1 and drag that little character on. That character is a little bit bigger than I'd like, so I'm going to pick a different size for this character, something that doesn't take up the whole screen. All right, good enough. And from this character, I want to define a physics body so that the character can interact with things. This is going to have a physics body. It's kind of like a circle shape, so I'm going to say a bounding circle. And I don't want it rotating when or getting knocked off center when it hits something. So I'm going to disable those 2 check marks, but I do want it affected by gravity. If we ever had the character jump, I would want it to fall back down. I also want to give this character a name. So with that selected, instead of just calling it SK Sprite Node, I'm going to call it character. And then for my ground, I also want that to have a physics body. So that's a rectangle. So I'll choose bounding rectangle. This time I don't want it to be affected by gravity because I don't want it to fall off the screen. And I'm going to give this the name ground. All right, the code that's associated with this game scene, I actually am going to have a label in my game, so I can leave that for now, but we're not going to have a spinny node. Did move to view. I'm not going to have it called hello label. I'll just have it called label. And let me, before I forget, make sure I add something with that name. Otherwise, we'll get an error when we try to run this. So a label right around here. I always like to change it from ultra thin to bold, and then maybe a different font size. And we're going to have something that keeps track of the number of coins you've collected. So coins collected starts out as 0. All right, so in GameScene.Swift, we're going to look for something with label. And so I better make sure that that has label on it. And then we're going to just keep track of the label property and change it later every time you get to collect a coin. I don't need it to fade in. It's okay if it starts faded in. There was no spinning node in this game. I'm not going to care about touch down or touch move to or touched up, but I will keep a skeleton for touches began. And we will add some code there. We can get rid of all of that. So right now, if you just hit run, select a different device type if you'd like to. So there's a pull down menu there. You can pick whatever device you want. We can just run the game and see what happens. And how do you know if you have more than one scene, which scene you're going to start at? In my game view controller, it says, here's the scene we want to start out with, game scene. So that's why we should start out with this scene here where we put our character. Let me look at the simulator, and it takes a little bit of time. Okay, so we have our initial scene. The first thing I want to do is animate our character. There were 2 different images of the character, so I want to get our scene alternating between those 2 images. In the game view, the game scene, I'm going to copy and paste this. Hopefully I'm going to copy and paste this. And we want to keep track of the character, but it's not an SK label node. Our character is an SK sprite node. So instead of that, and we can copy and paste this. And say we're looking at something with the name character. I probably could have retyped that. I'm not really saving much time by copying and pasting. All right, what about the images? There's 2 images which I'm going to put, just like I did in the last video, into a private array of textures. So I'll call it character textures. And the data type for that is SK texture, and the square brackets means you've got an array. And then there's only 2 of them, so I can update the character textures by appending onto that array. And let's see, it was SK texture, image named, and you could go back and look at that image. I think I was calling it frame 1 and frame 2. I'll just double check because I don't want to get an error. Yep, frame 1 and frame 2 were the 2 names. So the first thing I'm going to append is a frame 1, and the second thing is going to be a frame 2. So now my character texture has those 2 images. Now I can make an animation. And I want to animate with, let's see, I think it picked the wrong version of that function, with the character textures. And then how much time do I want it to be on each frame? This could be just trial and error, what you think looks the best. I'm going to try 0.1 and see how that looks. All right, and so now I've got that animation going. I don't want it to happen just once, so I'm going to add a repeat action. Repeat forever, and the thing we want to repeat forever is the animation that we just set up. And we want to add that to our character. So character run animation. And actually I need to add animation repeat to the character, not just animation. That'll just do it once. I want to keep repeating it forever and ever and ever. We jump over and cool, the little jaws are clenching. All right, so I'm going to move on to how you would move to the next scene before I get into the complicated physics interactions. So how to make a new scene. You can do File, New, and then File. And I need to add two new scenes, or two new files. One is going to be a Swift file, so I'll choose Swift. And I'm going to call this Game Over. So this will be what happens when you win or lose the game. Here's where I would have the UI. So that would be a SpriteKit scene. And I'll also call this Game Over, but the extension is different. Game Over. And let's go ahead and set this up. This is just going to have a label, and we'll fill in what the label will say later. It'll say Game Over, either you won or you lost. So I'm just going to have it say Game Over for now. You can change the size of this. Make it get bold, change the background to however you want. I don't think the ugly gray color is great. So if I choose the whole scene, we could pick another color. Let's do like a yellow. Oh, that's too bright. I want it to be a different color than the other scene so we can really tell that we've changed scenes. All right, that looks good. All right, and now when this scene opens, the code behind it, we're going to end up putting the code behind it in this GameOver.Swift scene, but there's one thing we need to do to hook those two up. So with the scene selected, I'm going to click over and look at the custom class. So what class is associated with the scene? And I need to make sure that this matches exactly with my .swift file that I want to be included when I'm running this scene. So right now it created just like an empty scene. You might have an import statement at the beginning. And what I want to add at the top of here, it's going to be very similar to the code from game scene. So one strategy would be you could copy and paste everything from game scene. We won't need all of that, but you could copy and paste it as a starting point because part of it's going to be the same. So the part that's going to be the same is that you're going to inherit from the parent SK scene, but the name of this class is called Game Over. The data here, I'm just going to add a public variable called win that you can set to either true or false based on whether or not the user won the game or lost the game. When you move to the view, we should go ahead and change. So I'm going to delete most of this. And instead of having a variable self-label, I can just create a local variable label. And let me double check and see what this was called. What's the name of this? It is label. So to be able to change that, I'm going to go ahead and look for a child with the name label, and then I can update the label. If the win condition is false, then you didn't win the game, and we can go ahead and add some code saying that the text should be better luck next time. And if you won, well, then you're just going to see this. I could make the default message like you win. And maybe instead of game over, I like that better. So you win. So we won't have to change the wording if they did win, but if they didn't win, we'll change the wording to better luck next time. We won't need an update function for this. The touches begin. I do want to put something in here to change back if they're going to play again. We need to go back to the game scene. So it's going to look for a file with the name of game scene and switch back to that. And I want it to fit and look nice on any screen size. So we're going to present the scene, Okay, so if I wanted to test out just this part, I could try to go straight to this scene when we start the game. So to do that, I would do the game view controller. Right now it's going to game scene. I could have it start at game over just to test that transition. So I'll go ahead and do that and hit run. All right, and now I'm starting with the U1. If I click, we go over to our game. All right, very good. We can go ahead and stop running this. And now we're done with the game over scene and the .swift file. And we can switch this game view controller to say, let's actually start at the game scene. And then now all of the work has to be done in our game scene. And there's quite a bit of code here. I'm not sure if I should pause and do some of the typing. Let me do it that way. I'll pause and then I'll explain what I've typed. All right, now I added 4 different lines up here that are going to be used with the detecting collisions. So all of the different items in my scene, so I'm talking about this game scene here, where we've got the ground item with the name ground, the character with the name character, and we're going to randomly decide whether we're dropping a coin or an anvil. So there's 4 different things that I want to apply bit mask categories to. So even though these are integers with 32 bits, I'm setting them equal to a value. And when I say 0x1, that's 1 in hex. In binary, it's got extra leading zeros, but the last 8 bits look kind of like this, and the decimal value is 1. So that's going to be the anvil. The coin is going to have, this is the hex, the binary and the decimal version of the coin, the character, and then the ground. So notice that for each of these, if you look at them in binary, there's a different bit that's turned on for each of those characters. And thinking about it in binary might help later when we're going to do things like a bitwise OR. All right, so I had set up the animation for the character. Now let me, for the character, set up things about the physics body. So we had put a physics body on the character. I'll jump back to that scene, and we had decided that there would be a bounding circle around this that's affected by gravity. So we're going to add some more things to that physics body. So we also want a category bit mask, so it knows what category it's in. It'll be in the character category. And then we also want to know what it should be interacting with, or what would be noteworthy when this character is in contact with something else. So what's in, what we want to keep track of is when the character collects a coin or when the character gets hit in the head with an anvil. So I've got a bitwise OR there, so either one of those would be noteworthy. And then also, along with the contact bit mask, I also want a collision bit mask for the same exact thing. So if we collide with either of those or come into contact with either of those, we want to be able to take action. All right, and then I added 4 lines that are really similar to what I did with the character, only first I said, let's find the child node, this SK Sprite node with the name ground so that I can match up with this SK Sprite node. And I want to say that that category is ground, and it's also interested in any time a coin or an anvil touches or has a collision with that, because I was going to say once something hits the ground, we could remove it from the scene. All right, and from trial and error, I've noticed that the physics, the default physics, how fast something falls to the ground is a little bit fast. So I want to change the physics world gravity and slow that down just so we have a chance of actually catching those coins and dodging the anvils. So from trial and error, this number seemed to work the best for me. All right, now I want to actually drop something from the sky. So I'm going to make a function drop object. And again, there's a lot of typing, so I'm going to pause it and do some of the typing and then explain the code. All right, so first under drop object, I added something to generate 3 random numbers. The first random number is going to be either a 1 or a 2, and if it's a 1, we'll drop an anvil. If it's a 2, we'll drop a coin. And next I'm going to pick a random number for an X and a Y position, and based on the scene, I noticed that if I went between negative 400 and positive 400, that would put us somewhere in between the range of the top of our scene. And I noticed that if I go around 640, a little bit higher than 640, then somewhere in that range would be where I could start to drop the coin so they don't all hit at the same time. I'm going to create this object based on the gold coin image. I'm going to assume it's going to be a gold coin and set its position to the random X and Y values, set the size and the name as gold coin, and then the physics body. Even though this object really has a radius that's bigger than 40, I kind of wanted to overlap with the character a little bit before it disappears, so I found that 40 looked good. And then I'm going to set the category as a coin, and I'm interested in interactions with the coin and either the ground or the character. And then this is what would add that to the scene, like dynamically at runtime. But there's 2 things I'm going to change. If my random number that I selected was a 1 instead of a 2, then I'm going to switch the name from coin to anvil, and the physics body category bit mask is going to be anvil. So to try this out, I'm going to put in the update function, which is we're going to need to change it so it doesn't every time it updates drop an object, but for testing right now I'm going to try this. So every time we're rendering the scene, I'm going to drop another object. We find our character is quickly overrun with gold coins. So that's number 1, I'm not seeing any anvils, and number 2, there's way too many objects. So to fix the way too many objects, I'm going to create a variable at the very top of the scene, and it's going to be a private variable called number of objects or something like that. And it starts out at 0, and every time we drop an object, we need to increase that. So the number of objects gets to be 1 higher. Oh, I meant plus equals. And then we don't want to drop more objects than the character can handle. So if the number of objects is less than 3, I'll go ahead and drop another one. Otherwise, if we've already got 3 objects on the scene, that's enough. All right, so that was the first thing. And then I also noticed I can actually see very clearly why everything was a gold coin is, along with changing the name to anvil, I need to actually change the picture so it actually is an anvil. So we're going to add another line of code inside this if statement. And the line of code is going to be something like the object texture is going to be equal to sk texture image named. And if I look back in my assets, I will see that anvil is the name of the image. So let's try running this again. All right, much better. We've got it randomly chose coin, anvil, coin, and now we need the character to be able to move to pick those up. All right, for the character to be able to move, I added some code to the touches begin function. So I want to look at the first touch and the location of that touch in my scene, and I want to say, is the location where the user touched greater than the character's X position? If it is, then we want the character's X position to be increased by 50. So the character is going to move to the right by 50 different pixels. And otherwise, if the location where you touched is less than the character's position in the X direction, then we want to change the character's position and decrease it. So move it to the left. Let's try running this. And now if I tap, I can move over, and I'm definitely having collisions, but we have one more function to actually handle the collision with either the coin or the anvil, but at least our character is moving. All right, so one more function to get this fully working. Unfortunately, it is the longest function out of all the functions. It's a function called didBegin. And actually, before I add that, I'm going to make this scene we're using multiple inheritance, the scene is also going to inherit from the physics contact delegate, so it can handle the physics interactions in this scene. And in the did move to, I'm going to add self physics world contact delegate and say this class is going to itself be the contact delegate. All right, so now hopefully it'll do the autocomplete for me on the did begin function. Yeah, so that's part of the physics delegate. So did begin, and then we're going to have contact sk physics contact. So this is the function that gets called every time you have a collision between the two different bit masks that you're keeping track of, or the contact between those two. So when you have contact, there's two different objects that are contacting each other. So they call one body A and one body B. So it could be a coin and the character, the anvil and the character, and you don't really know which order you're getting them in. So there's going to be a body A and a body B. And for debugging, I could go ahead and add a print statement and say contact, and we'll go ahead and print the name of the body A thing that you hit and the body B thing. And then let's run this and just see that debugging statement every time we hit something. And then we need to actually take action. So I'm going to move over and, ooh, I hit the anvil, and I look at the debugging statement. I hit the anvil and I move over, I hit the coin. Let's go back and hit the anvil. So we can keep track of the two things that hit. Now we just need to take the appropriate action. I think I'll pause because there's a bit more typing to do. Okay, so I just added an if and an else if. So if the first body A is the ground, and the body B is either an anvil or a coin, then you want to remove the anvil or the coin from the scene and decrease the number of objects. And then what if they were hit in the opposite order and the body A was the coin or the anvil and body B was the ground? Well, in either of those cases, now it's body A instead of body B that you want to remove. So I'll show you what this looks like when you run it. So now if things just hit the ground, they're going to disappear, whether it's the coin hitting the ground or the anvil hitting the ground. That'll just clean up the scene so we don't have, you know, hundreds and hundreds of things that are going off of the screen. So that's pretty clean. Now we need to handle the collision with the character. So back into here, and we're going to add some more code. All right, I'm going to add some more variables up here to the top of this class. I'm going to add a private variable for the number of coins that you've collected. So collected coins starts out at 0, and then every time you collect a coin, so anytime there's an interaction or a collision between the coin and the character. So I'm going to do a bitwise OR between the category, or the body A category and body B category. And then I'm going to see, is that the same as when I do a bitwise OR with the character and the coin categories? And if it is, that means it was a coin and a character that collided. So we'll add one to the collected coins. And then we're going to change the label to show how many coins we've collected. And then if the coin was the first body, we'll remove that from the scene. If the coin was the second body, we'll remove that from the scene. So go ahead and run this, and we should see that our coins should be handled well when the character collides with them. Oops, no coins on the first one. So oh, the coin's way over here off the screen. Let's see if I can still get it. I still got it. So the coin collected label went up to 1. Now it goes to 2. All right, now we have to handle the anvils. So it's going to be a similar thing, only this if statement will return something that's false. And so we need to instead check if the collision instead matched the anvil category and the character category, in that case, it's going to be a game over situation. So immediately you're going to end the game. And we actually had an image with the character with their eyes as an X, like they had just been wounded or whatever. So I'm going to change the texture, which is going to change the image. So we'll change the texture to, I think I called it game over. I'm going to go ahead and check. I called it, hit. So let me go back and change that to hit. But my scene was called game over. So I'm going to change that to say the character was hit. I'm going to create a variable scene. That's that game over scene. Game over. And then in that scene, that game over scene, we had a variable win that we're going to set to false because they didn't win the game in this case. Then I want to do the scale mode. And this time I want to show a transition. When you're switching scenes, there's an optional transition that you can use. Just some, like a fancy switch between one scene and the other. I'm going to use a push with the direction of up and a duration of how long it takes to switch scenes of 5 seconds. And you'll see what that looks like when we lose the game. And then finally, we're going to present the scene with the transition. Oops, scene and transition. All right, so let's see what happens when we lose the game, when we get hit by the anvil. Let's see. Build failed. Oh, let me put, so I just created this scene. I know that there's a game over scene. All right, put an exclamation there and just like force it to assume that that variable really exists. And now I want to get hit by the anvil so I can transition to the game over scene, and cool. And it takes 5 seconds to push this up, and then we say, see better luck next time. Click here to play again. And so I'm pretty much done with the game, except I could also add a win condition. Like if you select, if you get 10 coins, then you go to the game over scene. So if I wanted to do that, I would do it somewhere in where you're keeping track of the number of coins that you've collected. So I would do that in the if statement where you've just collected a coin, you've just updated the label. Somewhere around here, I could say, well, if the collected coins is maybe greater than or equal to 10, that could be my win condition. And just, I'm going to change it to 3 just because then I can win quicker, and I can test that win condition and then change it back later. And then I'm going to do kind of the same thing I did with the game over scene. And you could either do a transition or not. Copy that. And the only thing I'm going to change is the fact that you want the win condition to be true instead of false. All right, so let me try to win the game. Make sure my curly braces match up. I'm going to try to win the game by collecting 2 coins. Or sorry, 3 coins, not 2 coins. They're off the scene. There's nothing preventing my character from running off the scene. You could add some code to do that. 2 coins collected. 3 coins should be my win condition. And bam! And if you wanted to push down instead of pushing up, you could do that. But now you've won, you can click to play again. So I hope you've enjoyed creating a little SpriteKit game with more than one scene. Happy programming!